For the roundtable this week, we're seeing more severe storms in recent years. Tropical Storm Irene pounded the Catskills and Adirondacks, and Superstorm Sandy devastated coastal beach communities in New York and New Jersey. So how do regions across New York State better prepare to deal with major storms and severe weather? We are joined this week by Chris Thorncroft, who is chair of the Department of Atmospheric and Environmental Sciences at the University of Albany. Also Bob Bullock with the Rockefeller Institute, and also Keith Tile with SUNY Plattsburgh. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for being here. You're all teaming up to host a severe weather forum. That's coming up next week, April 23rd, on SUNY campuses across New York to talk about this trend that we're seeing and how to respond to it. What's the purpose of the forum?
Well, it really came out, Tom, of last year we had put on a similar forum. In fact, it was called Facing the Storm. It was a first initiative between the Department of Atmospheric and Environmental Sciences and the Rockefeller Institute because of a lot of work that we're doing right now with Homeland Security and disaster preparedness, which is really becoming a new focus of the universities with the governor's announcement of the new College of Homeland Security and Emergency Response. So we came together, we put the word out that this forum was going to take place with no expectation. Usually when we have a forum at the Rockefeller Institute, you know, we hold them right there and we can hold 100 people in our building. Within an hour and a half, we had 70 people registered. And I thought, this is not going to work at the Rockefeller Institute. So I put in a call to the Vice President for Research over the university. I said, Jim, I need some place that's big. And he said, how big? And I said, 200 to 250. And he said, you'll never get that many people for a lecture. And we ended up with more than 250. The interesting thing was that people drove from as far away as the Adirondacks and the lower Hudson Valley to come. And during the question and answer period, there was a woman who stood up and said it was a wonderful program, but it couldn't just be one program. It had to be repeated for it to be important and worthwhile. And moreover, she said, I have a lot of colleagues who would like to see this. And so what can we do to make it more generally accessible? That was when Chris and I got together and we talked about the idea of doing something that would really be connected to many SUNY campuses. And this year, in our first year, we have the folks from Stony Brook University, the SUNY New Paltz, of course the University at Albany, SUNY Plattsburgh, SUNY Potsdam, the SUNY College of Environmental Sciences and Forestry in Syracuse, and SUNY Oswego, all coming together and hooked up. And I really need to acknowledge the wonderful support of Cisco Technologies, the global technology company, because without them, we would not be able to bring all of these campuses together in real time.
So the SUNY campuses will all be connected. This will be via web of this forum. Who is participating and who are you hoping will attend?
Well, it's largely going to be our local government officials. And so if you take a look at it, county executives, people who head up county transportation departments or local transportation departments if it's at the town or village level. But moreover, state executives, as I was going through, and right now we're climbing towards 150 already, still with a couple of weeks out, you know, because we're still about 2 weeks out in our planning phase. And we're seeing a lot of folks from state agencies, the Canal Corporation, New York State Canal Corporation, Department of Transportation, Department of Environmental Conservation, and others. We're also seeing not-for-profit executives, county emergency managers, city and municipal emergency managers, because this information is vitally important as they're planning their budgets and as they're taking a look at what their resource needs are going to be.
And county emergency management officials are the ones who get the warnings out about impending severe weather and also obviously have to respond to disasters and weather-related incidents. And
it was really designed around them. One of our principal partners in the first year was the New York State Emergency Management Association, and they have been fantastic in getting the word out, and we anticipate that we're going to see emergency managers from central New York down to the New York Long Island metro area and up to the Canadian border for both the Plattsburgh and the Potsdam programs.
Chris, for the first part of the forum, you and climatologists plan to discuss recent trends and the impact that we've seen from severe weather across New York State.
That's right. So the region, the Northeast region, including New York, actually has had quite a significant increase in the frequency of extreme weather. There was a paper that recently published that showed in the Northeast over the last 50 years we've seen a 74% increase in extreme rainfall events. Actually that change is bigger in the Northeast than any part of the US. So we should be prepared, unfortunately, to see more extremes in the coming decades for sure.
Does this get into the question of what's causing it, or do you simply look at how do we deal with it, how do we forecast it
It's both. I mean, I think it's very clear that the trend that we're seeing in the Northeast is consistent with climate change, the increasing amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's very clear that that's consistent. And climate change models are also projecting that this trend will continue. So we do need to know where it's coming from. On the other hand, it also tells us that we need to be prepared with dealing with extreme weather by improving forecasts, having better weather information, for example. And so in the first part of the meeting, we have talks that deal with the climate change issue. I will be speaking to that point and bringing it down to the regional efforts. Then we have other talks about some recent extreme events affected Buffalo and New York, but we've had a number of such extreme events. And we also have a hydrologist from NOAA, David Valley, who's going to be talking about flooding and how extreme events affect flooding. So we're linking the weather to the impacts, discussing what's happened in the past, and ultimately being prepared of how to deal with that in the future is key topics of discussion.
And that again is being broadcast via the web. Then for the second hour, the local campuses are going to, well, localize it. And Keith, you've invited a number of folks from this region to participate. Who have you invited, and what do you think the focus of discussion will be for the local part here in Plattsburgh?
Tom, we've reached out to, excuse me, a number of individuals from, as Bob had mentioned, the local government officials to school districts as well, because many of those individuals have to make a determination early, particularly in the wintertime or when road conditions are bad, whether or not to send buses out. So we've reached out to them. We've reached out to Clinton County and Franklin County Emergency Services, the local government officials, the local regional engineer for New York State Department of Transportation, and a couple of other people. But we definitely need, being a week out, still to get the word out about this to the general population as well. They can all register and participate in the forum. We really have set up, I think, is a good panel. We have 4 meteorologists from the local area and then an emergency services coordinator. So we have right now Tom Messner and John Hickey from WPTZ, Sean Parker from WFFF over in Burlington, Scott Whittier, who's a warning coordinator, coordinating meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Burlington, and then Eric Day from Clinton County Emergency Services. They'll participate on the panel and discuss what severe weather has been and what the potential is and how we're going to work around some of those issues when severe weather hits the North Country.
And there's been no doubt over the past 3 or 4 years we've seen an increase from 2011 with the flooding on Lake Champlain, then Tropical Storm Irene coming later that year, and then also feeling some of the impact of some of the other storms, Superstorm Sandy and others. But there's certainly been more severe weather that we've been dealing with here in the Adirondacks and near Lake Champlain. And that is being held on the 23rd. 9:30 in the morning is when it begins. Angel Center on the
in the
SUNY
Angel
Plattsburgh
College Center, and then the last hour of the 2-hour presentation will be localized. So from 10:30 till 11:30. Depending, we're going to be in Angel College Center. Depending upon the size of the audience, the crowd, we may move it to one room or another. But we're going to be there. And I'm hoping we'll have at least 50, 60 people from the public, in addition to some of the students on the campus.
Free and open to the public,
it's
everyone's
free and
welcome.
open, yep.
All right. We're seeing many communities rebuilding with an eye to the weather. This is becoming more and more common. River and stream beds, bridges, roads, culverts, all now being designed to better handle huge amounts of water from major storms like we saw with Tropical Storm Irene, and also the flooding that goes with it. Also, Governor Cuomo wants to build what's being called the most advanced weather detection system in the country, a statewide network of weather monitoring stations called the Mesonet. And what exactly, Chris, would this weather detection system look like, and how would it improve over what we have now?
Well, currently we have, in terms of high quality weather information, and I'm talking about automatic weather stations, we have so-called ASOS sites. There are 27 sites serving those local regions where they have. 27 sites doesn't cover the state. And so we're left with many gaps, in particular up in the Adirondacks region. There are very few such stations. So the Mesonet I pronounce it with an English accent. The Mesonet will deploy 125 stations across the state, such that no part of the state, any person in the state is going to be within 25, 30 miles of such stations. So that weather information will be serving that locality. Every county will have a weather station in it. And this is going to be very important for monitoring the weather around the state. Because we simply have gaps. So, for example, if you've got rainfall falling in the Adirondacks now, feeding the rivers, you do not have real-time information about how much rainfall is falling, which is really, really important for predicting the risk of river rise. So we are effectively blind in many locations at the moment without such data. But there's much more than that going into the Mesonet, American pronunciation. And that's what makes it a game changer, if you like, in terms of statewide Mesonets, is the deployment of 17 enhanced sites which will have profiling technology. What that means is we will have instruments on the ground which probe the atmosphere up into the lowest few kilometers of the atmosphere, measuring things like temperature, humidity, wind. That data is crucially important for monitoring the state of the atmosphere, and also will be used for prediction. That data will go into models, weather prediction models, and those models will be improved by such data. So no statewide Mesonet has that capability. In addition to that, we're also going to be providing, and this is very relevant to upstate, snow measurements, snowpack measurements. So Catskills have snowpack measurements. It's important for water resources feeding the city. No such measurements actually take place in the Adirondacks. So we're going to be deploying a network of snow measurements, measuring snowpack. That tells us how fast the snow is building up. It tells us how it's melting. And melting this time of year can sometimes be very important for flood risk. So so the Mesonet is doing a lot of things. So it gets the network of measurements across the state, which we need, basic measurements. Then we have these enhanced sites probing the atmosphere. But we also have specialist measurements like snow. We also have soil moisture, which we don't have currently anywhere, not even on these other 27 sites. That's important information for the risk of runoff associated with rainfall events. Again, linking to flooding.
You mentioned the profiling sites. I think a lot of people would be surprised. Right now, that's still done the old-fashioned way, where they have to float a weather balloon to get that information.
Right. The state, and that's going to continue. That has to continue. We're not competing with those. We're supplementing, I would say. So the state is served by 3 such balloons, and one of the advantages of the balloons is they go way up into the upper troposphere, high up into the stratosphere. So they're very important. So we have 3 sites serving the state, and they're launched twice a day. The profilers have the advantage that they are continuously monitoring. So you're going to have 5-minute data of the going into these. So the data itself is valuable in its own right. So it gives you real-time information about what the atmosphere is doing. It'll tell you where the freezing layer is. All this information will tell you in real time where the difference between freezing rain and snow and rain. And we'll see this, how it's moving across the state. But also this data can be ingested into numerical weather prediction models so that they can be, more good quality data is important for these models. So that will then give improved, in collaboration with the Weather Service, I should say, improved weather predictions in the short range.
Will this be in cooperation with the National Weather Service, or will this be a private company? Because we know there's a private company now that offers weather monitoring stations and then supplies that information to counties, to sheriff's departments, to school districts. And
so this is a collaboration with the Weather Service. This weather prediction is an important venture. It's a big venture. So all of this is done in collaboration with the National Weather Service. In terms of siting the sites, so in addition to having high quality data, a big part of having high quality data is actually making sure you put these stations in sensible locations. You don't want them on a building, you don't want them next to a highway, because the measurements will be flawed and degraded if you do that. So there's a very sophisticated process whereby you choose the right site to represent the weather in that location. And we're doing that with the Weather Service, in collaboration with the Weather Service. We actually have a very good history of working with the Weather Service on research projects. So if there's a weather forecasting problem affecting the state, we have research projects devoted to those issues. So we have a very nice collaboration with those. It's also done in collaboration with Department of Homeland Security, so we're working hand in hand with those. And so the 3 groups, the University at Albany, the National Weather Service, and Homeland Security, are working together on this hand in hand. So in addition to the information from the data, the weather prediction modeling, there'll also be a collaboration with emergency managers regarding training on how best to use this data. So that's what the state needs, that kind of collaboration, and that's certainly core part of this project.
And we could assume if you're adding 125 or going to 125, there would be an increase in the number in the Adirondacks in our region here.
Absolutely. I say no one, every county in the state will be served by these. You shouldn't be further than, any one location shouldn't be more than 25 or 30 miles away from one of these sites. And that's what, again, that's what you need if you're going to measure and see the evolving weather systems as they go across the state. That's what you need if you're trying to pick up on the rainfall. Again, that's what you need for snow measurements. That's what you need for soil moisture. You need that kind of resolution of data, high quality data.
Does it help with the forecasting, or would it really be reacting real time to it?
It's both. I mean, there's certainly real time information, which is invaluable. So yeah, again, knowing snowfall rates, knowing rainfall rates, knowing where it's rained. So there's real time information, and we will be developing products, visualization products, web tools, apps that would actually use that information and devote it to the user. But a lot of that data will also be ingested, and again, this is with the collaboration with the Weather Service. We'll be working with the Weather Service to ingest that data into their models, doing the research necessary to pull that off in order to improve forecasts in the short range.
We hear cost estimates anywhere from 18 to 24 million. The majority of that would come from aid coming from the federal government for both Irene and Superstorm Sandy recovery money, but the state would have to pick up a certain percentage of the cost there. What's the status of this right now? Is this, are we still waiting to see, does it need legislative approval to move forward? Does it need funding? And is there any timetable as far as getting it up and running?
We're running. It's a $23 million project. The state, none of that money is coming from the state. And we're expecting to have the network deployed by the end of 2016. And the beauty of the network is that, as soon as stations are imminent, actually, but as soon as a station is up and running, it's providing data. So as soon as a station is deployed in a county, it'll be serving the county. So although the 125th one won't be in until the end of next year, there'll be a lot more going on before that.
We've heard a lot of meteorologists use the term like Gamechanger for this, that it enhances certain weather data collection by 100%. Is that?
The game changer in terms of statewide Mesonets is the profile, particularly the profiling information. As I say, the state is served by these 3 balloons that go up twice a day, 3 sites with balloons. No statewide Mesonet has a profiling network, and we will be deploying 17 of these across the state. You can be sure that other states are going to be looking at New York in terms of how we deploy it, the measurements we're getting, and how we're able to improve weather forecasts, both real time and short range, with that network. So the game changer is really coming from that.
From the profiling stations, and that uses
especially the profiling.
A laser to shoot up into the atmosphere, or how does?
It's nothing dangerous. It's federally approved, but it is a remote sensing device that interacts with the atmosphere, and we get a signal coming back to tell us. And again, so we'll be measuring temperature, humidity, winds in the lowest few kilometers, and that's a lot of. Our weather is there in the lowest kilometers of the atmosphere.
So this will be a huge component of what you're talking about on the 23rd, but are there other things that you'll be discussing as well?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot, weather's a great subject, but there's a lot going on in the weather field. Another theme that we will be discussing throughout is risk and how you deal with information about the probabilities of what might happen. I think the New York snowstorm was an example in recent history where this was a storm that inherently had low predictability. And what I mean by that, this is not criticism of any model or any forecaster. It was a tough situation, and it's tough because the atmosphere was in an unfavorable situation. And so I want to communicate through this forum the idea that there is probabilistic information available. The issue then is, what do you do with that information? And that's why we have Paul Cayano from the local TV network. We have someone from Homeland Security, Kevin Wisely. What do you do with information that is inherently probabilistic? So, for example, if you have a 50% chance of a historical snowstorm, what do you do? And if it was a 20% chance, would you do something different? Maybe not. It depends on the risk. It depends what's at stake, right? If the lives are at stake, you err on the side of caution. But it's a fascinating subject, I think, both for the people that have to make decisions,
Right.
but also for the public, how they react to these types of forecasts.
We know that this was certainly an issue during the lake effect snowstorm that we saw, because the question was raised, could the word have gotten out sooner about getting people off the thruway, because the thruway was closed down. Some people were stranded on the thruway. So a lot of this has to do with not only coming up with the forecast, but then deciding how and when to tell the public, and if it gets to a point where the public needs to be warned that this could be a significant weather event.
It's a huge issue. It involves scientists, it involves the public, it involves people that actually have to make decisions. It's a social science issue. When do you evacuate? There are very interesting studies that have looked at this type of issue, and one, just to give you an example of the social science, before someone before a member of the public reacts to a piece of information, they need to hear it from several sources. And so discussing how public will receive that information is very interesting. It's interesting academically, but unfortunately lives are at stake here. So I think it's a very crucial part of the discussion.
And I imagine it will carry over, Keith, into the local discussion as well, because you'll have 4 meteorologists, and you'll have Eric Day with the Clinton County Emergency Management Office there, and probably that's a big discussion as well, is getting the word out in this region when you have floodwaters rising, when you have evacuations, when you have an ice storm. And you had mentioned that this may be able to better detect ice and snow and rain, and certainly as we saw in 1998, that was one of the most severe weather events that the North Country has ever dealt with, was the ice storm.
It is, Tom, and matter of fact, just to localize it, when we have a major snowstorm in the North Country, at the college, we have to make a determination by about 6:30 in the morning as to whether or not we're going to open classes or open the, have classes on campus. If it's snowing in Churubusco or some other place, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen here in Plattsburgh. But at the same time, you've got school districts that are shutting down and not allowing their buses out. We've got 45% of our students right on campus living there. As you said, Chris, we've got, what do we do with them during the day when there isn't any classes? We do have to worry about those students who are living on campus, and then we've got another 25% that live within a mile radius of the campus. So we've increased it to 70%. Now, what do we do with everybody? And in addition, we still have to worry about the other 30% who are driving from a remote area. So we're always juggling, trying to make a determination as to whether or not we should open. We can always cancel classes later on in the day, but it's always a difficult decision. We turn to the meteorologists, we talk to the county as to what their guesstimate is. So we're looking at this we're very interested in what's going to be discussed at the forum.
Yeah, Bob, obviously statewide, other communities facing the same decisions.
Exactly so, Tom. From our perspective, we really looked at this as an extraordinary opportunity for public service. And really this is the purpose of and one of the great benefits of the SUNY system. Chancellor Zimpher refers to it as systemness. It's an opportunity for these wonderful institutions who really do know how to work together to come together to provide public benefit. And what's been interesting as we were putting together, because I was on each of the campuses working with the organizing teams, as I did with Keith and Eric Leibensberger and his colleagues, seeing the different orientations, the different focuses, depending upon where in the state you were, but moreover, what the orientation of the institution to its region and its communities was. So, for example, working with Keith and Eric, we saw this situation where they kind of honed right in immediately on the wonderful relationship that they have with National Weather Service and NOAA over in Burlington, and said, we really see this as a conversation about weather. Last year when we had done this, it was more of a conversation about emergency management. We threw out a little bit of information about weather forecasting and probabilities, but then we really got into the practical, okay, now what do you do with that information? This year, it's so much more about weather. And if you take a look at it, when you have institutions like UAlbany and ESF and Stony Brook that has done wonderful information and research with storm surge, they knew exactly how they wanted to bring their teams together, what types of folks they wanted to reach out to, and what type of benefit they wanted to provide to the local folks.
And such an important topic, you can probably see this continuing into the future.
Well, it's in fact actually some of the organizing teams have said, you know, this is great once a year, but there are two windows of opportunity that we look at. We look at going into the severe weather season, you know, so in the fall. They've talked about coming out of the winter. So really there's kind of a petitioning within the organizing groups that we take a look at this as a maybe 2-a-year program. And I think once folks see how much utility there is for this information, I think that it's going to be the type of thing that there's almost a pent-up demand that needs to be
Facing the Storm 2, Anticipating Responding to Severe Weather in New York State is being held on the SUNY Plattsburgh campus on Thursday, April 23rd at the Angel College Center beginning at 9:30. Free and open to everyone. And Keith, if folks are interested, can they pre-register or can they find more information out online?
That's correct. They can. We have an online registration form, and you'll be able to register right there. And matter of fact, we'll send out a parking permit for you, so make it easier for you to park on campus.
So Keith Tayo, Bob Bullock, Chris Thorncroft, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks.
Thanks.